Our resident speaker for today is Cindi Claypatch. We are so fortunate to have her. She's the founder and director of Health Realization Training Center, Center of Pillsbury United Communities. She spends her time offering training in a variety of organizations, schools, healthcare, social services. She provides education to parents, children, families, and individuals. She's certified in intuition and many other healing modalities. She has her own private counseling and healing practice called Prospectives. Her mission is to bring the prospects of health and healing to light through intuitive counseling, energy, and healing. With that, Cindi Claypatch.
Good morning. Is this on? Can you guys hear me okay? All right. The tendency of getting kind of quiet sometimes here. All right. That's interesting. That should be at the very end. Isn't that great? We go out into the field and then we get to start again, right? Thank you, Tina. That's nice. Well, good morning, everybody. So, when we think of beginnings, what do you think of? Birth? Pardon me? Yeah. First steps. Yeah. New day, okay. And when we look at the Easter season, you know, what do we think about with that? Yeah, rebirth, yeah. Uh-huh. And a lot of times it comes with that idea of the death and then the ascendance, right? And then the ascendance and then the return, which I think is always really interesting, you know, is that do we have to have things die to, you know, be reborn, or to have that new beginning? But I think, you know, when we look at the spiritual kinds of stuff, you look at all the energy that is connected to these. And I think that's really what our challenge is to see ourselves and everything as that energy that's always shifting and changing. And I think in this congregation, it's pretty typical for people to see that. But when we're out in the world, there's a lot of things that seem solid, right? They seem like structures, or even, you know, everything seems like it's stuck in that position. Usually when I'm going to do a talk, I start having clients come with similar things that they're all talking about. And just recently people were talking about feeling stuck. How many of you had that feeling in this last month? Yeah, quite a few. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And then I started getting calls where people were saying, wow, what's happening? Things are shifting. And so whether it's Mercury getting out of retrograde, or whether it's, you know, the sunlight, whether it's that promise of spring, because the equinox, you know, we had the equinox. But whatever it is, there's all of a sudden a shift, and in that shift, then the perception is totally different, and then our experience of ourself is totally different, isn't it? And so it's always very interesting to me. I have to turn just a little bit here. This is something that fascinated me years ago when Deepak Chopra wrote his first book, Quantum Healing. Maybe some of you can remember way back then. And you know what he's talking about is that our structure, even on the physical level, is not frozen. It's not as we think it is. And then Alex Gray was so great because the pictures on the right there, if you've seen Alex Gray's work, he's always able to capture the energetic flow of who we truly are. And then he shows how we then come into a little bit of form, and then now we're into real form. But what I love about that picture with the baby is how fascinated the baby still looks with the energy in the field, huh? Yeah. But as we kind of move away from our clarity of being a child, when we're being so close to the spiritual aspect of ourselves, then we start to create structures and forms that we think are, who we are and what we are. And what I think is so powerful about that is that, the information and the intelligence within the field, and that is running through all of us all the time. So, much like a river, Greek philosopher who was talking about the human body is much like a river, is that no matter when you take a look at it, it cannot be the same river. And I think that's a real simple metaphor for us, is that there is something happening and moving constantly through us, whether it's an emotion or whether it's molecules or whether it's a form of energy or a sneeze, bless you, that there's something constantly moving through us. I thought this was fascinating years ago when I saw this, is that you make a new liver every 6 weeks, new skin once a month, and a new stomach lining every 5 days. Isn't that wild? Yeah. And when I first saw that, and I saw how our body changes, it was so interesting to me because I had a diagnosis of chondromalacia. That sounds really big, doesn't it? And all it was that my kneecap was wearing away the cartilage underneath. And so it was like, oh, I have chondromalacia. And somebody'd say, well, you want to go play volleyball? I can't, I have chondromalacia, And I had this, that perception placed in my head, which then totally changed how I could do my life. And I was only 20. So at 20, you can't go skiing. You can't play volleyball, you can't do anything. And then there was some part of me that after I read this, I thought, oh my gosh, if I'm creating new cells all the time, why am I re-educating the new cells about the old problem? And it was like, wow. So then I had to drop that label of chondromalacia, right? Only to pick up others, I'm sure. But I started to see that all it took was a shift in that perception that I am not the same all the time. That nothing about me really is the same. Like when you look at this, it's so great because it's, the skeleton you have now, you didn't have 3 months ago. And so that means that your molecules and your cells and your organs are shifting and changing how each thing is in our body. And our mind is constantly creating a different thing, isn't it? That if you have a thought go through, your chemistry changes, right? You think of something scary and you sweat, or you get cold. That your whole system is so hooked up to constantly be changing based on how we're seeing and thinking of the world and knowing about the world. That before I knew that my system was changing all the time, I walked around in life a lot different. Isn't that right? But once you start to know it, then all of a sudden you can play with that, right? Because then you start doing all the other kinds of things, because it's like, well, if that isn't solid and the same all the time, then I wonder what else isn't the same all the time. You take each learning or each lesson and then you open it up to the bigger picture of like, wow, I wonder what else has been something I've been holding a certain way. So Chopra also said, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you replace 98% of all the atoms in your body in less than a year. Those atoms drift in and out. Isn't that fun? Yeah. Now, in reality, they say that within a year and a half, you replace all of the atoms. So you get to even replace that 2%. You know, that picture is really what best describes or, you know, gives us the view of who we are, is constantly charging and expanding and clicking off stuff, pulling stuff in, sending stuff in and out, that flow, and stuff moving, and instinctually doing that because it knows how to do that. Yeah. I always think it's interesting when I'm doing some training about thought or you know, other stuff with health realization, and it's like you don't have to think about beating your heart, you know, pumping your lungs. It's an instinctive thing. You know. It's connected to that whole that's always moving and always changing. So we're really not like having lines of beginnings and endings, are we? It's really always shifting, but we didn't always know it. So how many of you were Trekkies that are willing to admit it? Okay, there's more. That every atom belonging to you as well belongs to me. Walt Whitman. So long ago, he was saying that. So I'm you, you're me, we're all together. And by sitting with each other, we're constantly changing and taking in each other's energy and encoding it. That's the good news when you're in a room like this. You know, but we're doing that out in the world too. They say now that after, you know, like 1 month's time or 1.5 months' time that we will have shared atoms with everybody on the planet. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, you like that, don't you? I can see. It's like, yeah. So if you're ever feeling stuck with who you think you are or what hand God dealt you or anything like that, just know that you're not just you. It's like a party line. Remember the old-fashioned party lines? Hey, Mrs. Smith. Oh, Mrs. Johnson, you're on too. You know, is that we really have this connection with each other. And in that connection, then why wouldn't we try to practice to benefit off of that, right? See, when I know of things like that, then I'm thinking, okay, so maybe I want to share some molecules or some intentions or some insights with Greg Braden, maybe. You know, and all of a sudden I'll think, okay, so why wouldn't I use my mind to say, you know, anything that might benefit me, I allow in. You know, and I make that request because, heck, I might have a good little line to him, but I wouldn't know it unless I tried. You know how you read a book sometimes and you set book, or if you don't have time to read? How many of you have ever had like no time to read, but you set the books by you anyways? Because you know that you're going to be able to connect on a different level, and they say might get it through osmosis. You know, well, it's true because it has energy, it has a life force, it has wisdom and intelligence running through it. So a lot of times I have stacks of stuff that I really would love to read that, but I just don't have time, so I'll just put it there. And then all of a sudden I'll be going about and I'll have different ideas running through. And I don't know if I picked them up from the book or whether I picked them up from passing through people or what. But it's like, you know, when you think of us dematerializing, we really are that energy. And I think that Star Trek really captured that for us for the first time, you know, when we got to see the beam me up and then they had to come back. But isn't that funny, that picture where he's not understanding that? He's looking at himself like, oh, you know, am I back yet? You know? And it's like, yeah, I want to be back, but I don't want to be back in the same form all the time. I don't want to be in a form where somebody holds me as this is who I am all the time, because it's always changing. You know? This is kind of fun when you think of 90% of your body as mass. But we really were created through these beautiful carbons and oxygen and hydrogen and all this stuff out in space. And really, so our space, we're in space, space is within us. So we aren't limited. So it's that beginning of seeing ourselves as so much more, and then the ability to access it. So even back then, they were talking about this, to dematerialize. Now that doesn't mean that we're going to just walk out of here and be dust on the floor when we leave, but who knows? No. It's that part of us shifting, and that things don't always have to stay the same. In the study of a healer from Greece, his name is Daskalis, he would put his hand on the spine of somebody, and the spine would dematerialize. Let's say it was a curved spine. It would dematerialize and then rematerialize as a straight spine. And that was in our lifetime. So that means that we have this ability, if we thought about it, that we are ever changing and ever beginning and coming into something all the time. This is with better special effects. Right? And a new level of leadership. So to me, what's so important all the time is that where are we placing our attention? You know? So I think of all of our free will is like a magnifying glass, that wherever we place our attention is what we get more of. So if we place our attention on chondromalacia, then guess what? I'm really bothered by my knees. When I learned to take my attention off of that and start telling my system something different, then it was amazing that I could start running, and I started doing things that were more athletic again. How many of you have I don't like the word overcome because it almost means like there's a fight with it, but have transcended some of your circumstances? Would you share it? Georgie?
Well, several times I've been able to heal myself by using information available to everyone. For example, I had a diagnosis of diabetes, and I recall that my mother had a similar diagnosis, and she did. So I went out to discover what diet she was on. Well, it was a low-carb, no-sugar diet. And I went on that, and I lost my diagnosis of diabetes. And also in the process, I had a diagnosis of arthritis that went away because I stopped eating wheat. But through a process of perhaps believing that I can do it, even if it seems like I can do it.
Yeah.
I don't know which was more important, the low-carb diet or my belief.
Well, the belief led you there.
Belief led me there.
Yeah. Who else?
When he started hurting, it was like actually being able to walk up and downstairs and that kind of thing. And I'm a firm believer that you can heal yourself through diet and through movement. So it's like, I'm not going to let it bother me, and I'm going to keep moving. I refused to take the elevator. I kept taking the stairs. I started going on longer walks, and I'm not having the same problems that I was having.
That's great. Isn't that great? So again, that's a huge shift in the part where we don't have to always buy into the story, right? Because that's all made up, isn't it? Now that doesn't mean we don't seek medical attention or that there aren't times where things can be very useful. But I think what's interesting with each of those stories is that there was a shift in the way that you had to think about it. Now, things happen like that all the time where something that wasn't known becomes known, and then you do it differently, or you have a different level of appreciation for something. And I was with a little kid last week, and he had told me that he had just learned that if you have, jelly beans, and you have them in your hands, and it's a grape one and a cherry, or, the flavored jelly beans, those really strong ones. And he said that if you plug your nose, you can only taste that it's sweet. That the flavor was really coming from the nose part. And I said, wow, And it reminded me of a time when I had first been injured, and I was trying to do all these different things to get better. And I had gone to an herbalist who would put, 17 herbs in a bag and said, boil it. And then when you end up with just a cup of it, that's what you drink because it's the most potent. Has anybody ever done any of those? Have you done them without plugging your nose? Oh my God, I had no idea. I tasted it and it was so bitter and so, oh my God, I just couldn't even believe it. And I'm looking at, now a cup is looking like a big amount. But a cup of ice cream doesn't look like very much. But that cup of that potent stuff that I was supposed to have, even though I wanted to do it because I knew it might help me, I was having that struggle in my head with it. Then all of a sudden I had that realization that if you plug your nose and drink it, and I could do it. A huge amount of the taste was totally gone. Don't you find that fascinating? And so in that, then it means oh, isn't that interesting? So just altering our belief about something means we have a different experience of it. And then it means you can maybe go find other remedies and other ways to go about. But until you have that idea that something doesn't have to be the same way as you think it is, we'll just keep going down that way, right? Out of habit. We habituate to our systems all the time. Your family systems, your work situations, you habituate to them just because that's what we do. We encode with each other and then we go about. But if we could kind of think about how would I like to see this new? How can I do this in a different way? Asking those questions then opens the field, doesn't it? But until we know that something could change, we just do it the way it is. So I think that's fascinating. I think it also is very fascinating when you look at somebody who, has anybody known somebody who's had amnesia? It's a fascinating thing. When I was on the psychiatric units working at Abbott Northwestern years ago, I had gotten to meet two different people who, during the time that they had amnesia, one of them didn't need her glasses. Isn't that interesting? And one of them didn't have allergies. Interesting, isn't it? So it means that, wow, how we see ourselves, how we might hold something in our field. So then I'm always kind of like, well, if that can happen, then if I'm struggling with something, I'm going to ask, how can I be playing in the field in a way that would be different than this? And I ask the questions, what would it look like if this could be different? It's fun, isn't it? Yeah. So the same as if you look at, I brought this up before, but a multiple personality disorder. You look at somebody who during an intense situation probably popped out and latched on to another wave or another personality that was needed. And you can see people with that totally change their voice, totally change everything about themselves, not know anything about some of the others. And it's fascinating. I have 3 clients right now that have that. And they're called disordered, multiple personality disorder. And I think high intelligence, high level of technology, they're able to do what we're going to hope we can do in a little while. Well, I think I'll just be this. They can totally tap into that, and then it's like they beam themselves back in a different way. And so it's interesting. Now, doesn't mean that they don't have to clean up their messes sometimes or other things, but it shows us that, isn't that interesting how we can be moving in different waves and moving in different fields. So where you place your attention, so do you want it, over a bug? You'll get a bigger bug. Do you want to place it on something else? Something that's more positive so that you bring in the energy of that? I do. Isn't that a great picture? To me, when you are like having a day where you're a little bit low, now there's so much out there. All you have to do is get on a computer and Google a word, and you will receive things, right? And so it's like you click on the images, and then you can look for one that helps shift you. And I just think this is just great. So when you look at that, what is the feeling you get from that? What does it look like to you? Freedom? Joy? Okay. Whatever that is for you, if you were to kind of hone in and try to encode with that feeling, you see it. To me, it's like fun, and so you look into that joy, and you go into your system and you try to remember that joy, encode your body to remember that feeling, because then when you want to attract more of that feeling, you now have that little program there. That if our cells and our physical and energetic systems inside of us don't hold a certain vibration, then invite one in. And as you invite one in, then you bring that into your system, and then now you remember it, and you have that channel. So a lot of times, like when people talk about law of attraction, they have a hard time because they're just thinking about something, but they don't have that feeling state that they hold, so they aren't going to vibrate at that level. And that's innocent. I do it a lot. Well, I think I want this. But it's more like you remember that feeling state. When you look at some of Candace Pert's, she does a lot of biology and peptides, emotions, what is that book? Molecules and Emotions. She was one of the first ones that kind of really looked at it and said that, like, if you constantly have a cell and you are putting to it addiction, habits and addictions, then that cell is going to get programmed to that and not go for an apple. I recently heard her talk, and she says it's not going to go for the apple because it's constantly being programmed about the addictions. So it's so interesting that if we remember and hold an emotion in our system, then you're going to go there more often. So look at pictures that help you. Isn't that great? So what emotion does that bring to you? Or thought? Peace? Flexibility. No kidding. But that is just one of the greatest pictures. So, one time going on the web, I go around and I look, and it's like that picture. I thought, oh my God, that just has to be out there in the universe. Because it brings such a nice feeling. A 100-year-old woman in a table tennis tournament. Isn't that fun? So I bet you she wasn't looking at her aches and pains a lot, huh? She looks pretty intent too, doesn't she? So it's like she knows how to focus. So it's kind of like, how about this one? Looks like a little alien, doesn't it? But that's really, it's like that's out there, that's our spring, isn't it? And when we see stuff starting to come up more than some states, we get pretty darn excited, don't we? Yeah, we're just like, oh my gosh, something's coming up. And there's that excitement, something's brewing, it's changing, you know, we're beginning a new thing. And that's really where we want to be with most things. It's like, can we be excited? Can we be in the new? You like that, don't you? Sort of? Kind of? No, I'm just kidding. Well, this doesn't show very well in here, but this is one of the first things that we see in Minnesota that comes up, right? This is called Scilla. This is tiny little flowers, and everybody just gets so excited about them in the beginning. How many of you have these in your yard? Anybody? Do you like them later? Yeah, usually we get so excited about them in the beginning, but then after a little while, then we're done with them because they show up different in your grass, so it looks a little bit like quack grass, whatever you say. So it's got a different, so much of the green. So we love the color, we love it, we see it, and then we get used to it, and everything else is blooming, so now it's a problem. And that's how many, people have felt that about your relationships. Love it, love it, love it. Oh my God. Yeah. It's like, could we go back to what it was like when we first met? Could we remember that feeling, that charge that we had when we were excited about the differences? Oh, that's really interesting. Really? Oh, wow. Well, I do it like this. And we're so excited about the differences. And then a little bit of time goes on, and what happens to those differences? They become problems, right? So if you could remember, go back to that remembering of what it felt like when it was different, then you start creating that. Next we have our daffodils, right? And these are all so wonderful, and we get really excited about them, and then sometimes people later really don't like them because once they stop flowering, then they're taking up space. So we're constantly shifting, and that's okay. It's okay that we do that, but we want to recognize and try to hold the memory of when something was wonderful. We move into the tulip season. How many of you have tulips? Do you get pretty excited when they're coming? Yeah, the promise of spring. So the promise is that part that we know we already have in our system that something's going to come and change. And the same thing happens with us with everything else, is we could know in our energetic system that something's going to constantly come and change. And it's going to shift us and help us. So it's in holding to that movement as bringing in something beautiful. This is such a nice one. The universe has no fixed agenda. Once you make any decision, it works around that decision. There's no right or wrong, only a series of possibilities that shift each thought, feeling, and action that you experience. And that's where law of attraction is so helpful for some people, is that part that you don't have to know how it's going to happen and you don't have to figure it out, You just make a decision that something might be different. I like to ask questions to invite it in, if this could be different, what would it look like? And then just stay open, because the universe is way, way, way more intelligent than my little pea brain. So don't forget to just dream it. Dream of a better thing. Dream of something, it's like when you dream, it's just really like that. It's like an energy goes out into the universe and pulls something in. I like visuals because now that I have this visual in my head, then that's what I can see and think. And I'm just going to send something out to reclaim or to grab something that's going to be in perfect alignment for where I am and what I want. I can't remember if I told this at the first, I think in January I spoke, but when I was doing a meditation on the 12-12-12 day, I decided to take some time off to really just meditate, and I was asking, what is it that we need to see right now? And then what I got given was I saw this picture of, you know, Harry Potter, when they take that thought wave, they have to go collect a thought wave for some, I don't know, some remedy or something that they're doing, but I remember thinking of it, and they pulled it up like a strand. And it really is. All energy is moving in waves and particles in this. So it was, they picked up this wave. Well, what I was shown in my meditation was that when we dream, we send up these waves. My guides were letting me know that we want to shift just from not intention, but to dreaming. Because intention is like so thought-oriented. In dreaming, we tend to hook more feeling into it. And so that's why we connect better. And so what they showed me was like when I would dream, I would have a wave go up, and then they showed me like little people knitting really fast and throwing scarves down. Isn't that great? But you can see that. It's like, you know, the universe is going to try to bring in our possibilities for us. So we might pick out the yarn, and they'll figure out the pattern. And then I think we all need to do some collective dreaming, where we each see us as like maybe one of those spring flowers with the excitement and the joy and the energy around it. And then we put that together into something that we're looking for. And so when we're looking for something, are we looking for peace? Are we looking for resolve? Are we looking for strength? You know, are we looking for transformation? And that's all we, like as a collective, you know, have to do is pull our idea and place it somewhere. Because the power of the collective makes something so much more. So as you go about, you know, kind of be thinking about what it is you want to put out there. You know, being conscious of what we're putting out there in the universe, what we're bringing in, how we get to share molecules. Everybody sitting in here today now is a part of each other. You know, and seeing the best in that. So are you open to just a short meditation? Okay, so some music. All right. So make sure you're comfortable in your seat. And take 3 deep breaths. Relaxing your system. Imagine the energy coming up. All the way up through your knees and down. Bringing the earth energy up. And coming up the left side and releasing down the right. Energy run all the way up through the knees, your pelvic region, your shoulders, and crossing over your heart space to squeegee and release any emotions. you've been harboring there. And release it down through your right side. Do that a couple times. Now imagine breathing the earth's energy up through your center and connecting to that heart space. And in that heart space, just ask your higher self to review any molecules, any carbons, any emotions, or any thoughts there that no longer serve you. Imagine that you can just gently roll up any scripts, any energies onto like a snowball or a script that you can roll it up. And as you do that, you're changing the energy. You're knowing the power of focused attention in a way to try to bring in some lightheartedness. So as you roll that up, now discard that in whichever way you find would be good for you. And go back in and see if there's any remnants or residue. Anything that you can release. And send that down through your right side to the earth, where it can be converted into something more useful. Take a deep breath, expanding your chest. Knowing that there's something just brewing within your field that wants to take the place of the old. Invite that in. It may come in the form of a picture or a flower or energy or light, a prayer, a song. Whatever it is, just bring it in. And ask that your higher self stimulate it when it's appropriate. Activating it so that it serves you, people around you, your communities, within the states and within the world and the other worlds. Now take the energy up into your third eye, into your mental worlds. And ask that anything, any thoughts that you have that you're holding, any of our habits that we have that aren't in alignment of what was brought into your chest, just gently leave as if it's a vapor, or as if the light within you just burns the density. And take that will and that invitation to bring in the light that shines in the areas where we can use our mind to be in service to yourself and others. Just breathe in slowly, taking the attention between your head and your heart space. Just ask that yourself or your guides balance those two places. And now with the invitation, invite in any supports or help from the unseen to accompany you in those new feelings. Asking for their assistance to manifest and make real your dreams and your desires for yourself and those you love, and for the planet. Now, take a ray from your heart and your head. Send it outside your body to connect. And then with that connection, bring it into the center of this room. And offer any bit that you find appropriate that you could send to that center meeting place for this group. Extending it now to the people outside of you and around you. Each of you has a gift that you're bringing. Each of you has a connection to something so much bigger than we see. And place a dream there in the center for humanity. Allow yourself a moment to picture it. The energies that you have to offer, those beyond you running to that point, so we can create a new world. And slowly take that beam, retrieving it back into your heart space and your third eye. And letting it come back into its own realms within you. Then ask that you balance it again between your head and your heart space. As you breathe your next 3 breaths, Bring yourself back into your body. Noticing the chair that you sit on, the floor that you have your feet upon. And in that space, know you have all that you need. Thank the unseen world for being of assistance. And appreciate, remember that feeling of appreciation for their assistance. So that you remember what that frequency or that vibration or what that vision felt like. For when you're out in the world feeling like you're by yourself. Call upon that memory. And when you feel it's appropriate, come back into the room. Open your eyes. That looks pretty good. All right, I thank you for your participation and bringing your presence and all of your supports and your teams around you in. Wish you well on your beginnings, which are everlasting.